Welcome to Rose Red Homestead. Today's video is both fun and very, very important. We are going to talk about how to safely dry eggs for long-term storage. So we'll get to that in just a moment. I ran an experiment. I'm always experimenting yesterday, and these are actually 6 eggs that I dehydrated in our regular dehydrator yesterday. I have not yet powdered them. They just come out in these beautiful little flakes. You can dehydrate eggs 2 ways. You can scramble them first and then dehydrate the scrambled bits, and that is really yucky. My opinion. The other way to do it is what we're going to demonstrate today, which is breaking them into the container of a blender, and then we're going to blend them up a little bit and then put them in these little trays that came with my dehydrator. If your dehydrator does not have trays like this, you may have to improvise using plastic wrap or something lining your trays in order to be able to do that. So let me tell you what I do before I ever dehydrate anything, and that includes eggs. I think about how I want to use them after the fact. When they are powdered like this, how am I going to be using them? Well, for the most part, I'm going to be making scrambled eggs or omelets for breakfast, or I'm going to be adding them to baked goods, cakes and pancakes and waffles, scones, which is something I'm working on right now, a whole new set of recipes. And so I want those eggs to rehydrate in a raw state. And it is very important then that we pay careful attention to the temperature at which we are going to be dehydrating. Now, an egg, once it gets up to about 140 after it's out of the shell, then there are some proteins in the albumin, which is the white part of the egg, that start to coagulate at 140. We don't want that to happen. We want to keep it in its raw state. And so be sure when you set your dehydrator that you set it to 140 or below, 138, if you can set it that low. Mine goes in increments of about 9 degrees. So I dehydrated these at about 140, and it took about, a piece of them are still in there, the middle. These aren't completely flat, and so it was thicker right here in the middle. And so I just had to lift this part out, and it's back over in the dehydrator on a little plastic lid in the dehydrator so that it can finish dehydrating. So I'm very, very excited about the fact that you can indeed dehydrate raw eggs and make them safe in order to store long term. But in starting the process of really calculating about how many eggs I'm going to need in a year, I'm way behind on powdering eggs, and so I really need to get started on that. And a year's worth of home dehydrated or freeze-dried eggs, a year is about all we want to count on. Professionally canned ones can last up to about 10 years. We can't mimic what their processes are. So the eggs that we do at home will be good for a year or 2, and that's plenty long because we can rotate through those and keep replenishing them. I'm sure you all remember my saying a number of times that when we do pressure canning, we need to know our enemy. And with pressure canning, our big enemy is botulism. Well, with doing eggs, especially since we are going to try to dehydrate them raw, we need to know our enemy, and that is salmonella. And so we will be talking about salmonella once we get these all processed, and I will go through the steps that we need to do to ensure that once the eggs are in the powder and we start using them, the precautions that we need to take to be sure that salmonella doesn't rear its ugly head and get us. So we'll talk about that a little bit later. So in this blender now, I have 7 eggs, and my tray yesterday, I put 6 eggs on it and I learned that I can do a little bit more, so I'm putting 8 eggs per tray. So I'm just going to use the pulse here for a second. I'm actually just going to pulse it off and on, and you can see about how much I do. Just a quick, just one quick little flip. Second one, 3, 4, and that is blended enough for me. Now, if you like them all one consistency, then by all means go right ahead and do it how you like. Now, one way that I could do this was, this is how this fits in my dehydrator. I have 3 of these little trays, and they don't fit by themselves. They have to go on top of another tray, and you can see that they're not quite level. So I could pour the eggs right here and then try to walk across and put this into the dehydrator, but I'm not going to do that. I will spill it for sure. So we're going to go over to the dehydrator and I will fill these 3 trays. So I'll meet you over there in just a minute. This is our dehydrator. It is a Magic Mill. It's an old one. These are plastic, but they've done fine for us, and we're not going to get a new one. So I'm going to pull the tray out, and then I'm going to pull this tray out a little bit more and just pour right in the middle here. And I don't want this to be too thick. So this is 8 eggs. And it just fills that tray perfectly. So I'm going to slide the white tray back onto the regular tray carefully, and then slowly put it inside. And I'm going to do the same thing with these 2. Now I will show you the leftovers from yesterday's experiment. The edges are now getting dry, but it's still not dry in the middle. So this is just a plastic lid, and I'm just putting it right there. Okay, so I'm going to finish this up, and then I'll meet you back over at the regular place. The dehydrator is set for 12 hours, so we'll see how they are after 12 hours. This morning at 4 a.m. I was up doing the very same thing with the blender, only this time I would put 18 eggs in here, do the same thing, and I poured them into 4 of our freeze dryer trays. And then I put these outside in our regular freezer, so they have now been freezing for 12 hours. They're frozen solid. And we just checked the freeze dryer, it's ready to go, and we got the eggs out of the regular freezer and they're ready to put in, so let's go out and get those going too. The temperature inside Kelvin is now 15 degrees Fahrenheit. It says this freezer dryer is working correctly. The refrigeration condenser may turn on and off until you load the food and press continue. Then in big letters, load food into freeze dryer, close drain valve. So that's what we're going to do. So I can open it up now because there's no vacuum, and it's cold in there. Here is our tray of frozen eggs. And so I'm going to slip that right in here, load all 4 in. Put the insulating pad in place. Close the door. Then I have to close the drain valve. Needs to be able to form a vacuum, and so that has to be closed. And now I'm ready to continue. It's going to get way noisy when I hit continue. So this will take about 24 hours, maybe more, to do. And so we will come back tomorrow when both the dehydrator and the freeze dryer are finished, and then we'll show you what comes next in terms of drying and powdering eggs for long-term storage. So we'll see you tomorrow. Good morning. It is a gorgeous fall morning here on the Colorado Plateau, and my favorite cameraman is standing right there. What could be better? So we are going to just do a quick check-in on our dehydrated eggs. Here are the 3 trays that we put in yesterday. They were They've been processing for 13 hours. As you can see, they're really dry around the edges, but not so much right here. So it's the same thing. This is my trial run, and these eventually did get dry, so we'll be adding those to what we powder in a little while. But for right now, because these are all done on the edge, I don't want these to process anymore. So I'm just going to pick up the edges, put them in this pan, and then I'm going to leave the centers in place, and we'll put those back in the dehydrator probably for another couple of hours. These processed so far for 13 hours, and I imagine, yep, it'll be at least 2 or 3 hours before those will be done as well. I went outside this morning. I've been out several times checking the eggs in the freeze dryer, and I'm happy to report that they are now, after 17 hours, on the final dry. And so they're probably about 5 hours, maybe a little bit more, away from being finished out there too. So I'll bring you back after I have prepared these to go back into the dehydrator. So here they are, ready to go back into the dehydrator with just the middles. If your trays are completely flat, you won't have this problem, but you know, we work with what we have, and so I'm going to be putting these back in the dehydrator. This is the amount that we got from off the trays that are already dried or apparently dry. I'm going to go ahead and add our test case to this. And it is going to be really important that this egg powder is completely dry, because we do want to stave off botulism as well, and I'm going to get into all of that after we come back and are ready to make the powders. So we will see you when everything is all finished and we're ready to powder it up. Good morning. The freeze dryer finished after dark last night, 27 hours to do these eggs, and I checked my logbook, and that's exactly how many hours it took the first time we did freeze-dried eggs. This is the pan of dehydrated eggs. The last little middle sections took about 15 hours to do. So our next step is going to be to powder these eggs, and then we're going to rehydrate them. I'm going to vacuum seal and drop in an oxygen absorber, and then we're going to talk about salmonella and botulism. So here we go. We're going to start with these eggs. These are the dehydrated eggs. So we'll put a couple of scoops in. I usually put a plastic thing right there, and I forgot, so I'm just going to go ahead. One of the things that I want to be sure of is that these eggs are very, very powdered. So I am going to go ahead and just put them through this strainer to strain out anything that needs to be rerun. So that was a little bit of a challenge to get those powdered. You may have a better way of powdering them than I do. I finally ended up taking this little piece off, turning this container on while it was empty, get the blade going really fast, and then pouring in through this hole, and it seemed to do a lot better. You can see some pretty interesting layering here. That's the difference between the albumin, the white, and the yolk. I wanted to see how easily these turn in the jar. That's one indication of dryness. We need to be sure that these eggs are completely dry in order to prevent botulism. Now, one of the things that I'm going to do, I'm going to show you how to rehydrate these. There are lots of different opinions on how much egg powder constitutes one egg. I looked at a lot of the professionally canned ones in the number 10 cans, and they pretty much say 2 tablespoons. So I have 4 tablespoons right here, 1/4 of a cup, and then I do a 1-to-1. So I'm going to put in 1/4 of a cup of warm water, and I'm going to stir that around a little bit. It should look eggy, so we'll see. I'm going to set this aside. And for right now, I'm just going to put the lid on. We will end up vacuum sealing these in a few minutes. Now, The freeze-dried eggs should go much easier. These are just as light as air. They're wafer-like. They're completely dried. I don't have any concerns at all that these aren't completely dry, and so I won't need to put them back in the oven. Had these not rotated the way they did, if they were sticky, now remember there's a little bit of fat in eggs with the yolk, so then I would have put the powder back in the oven or back in the dehydrator to give it a little bit more drying time. And these just crumble in my hands. So it's very easy to powder these. I'll show you one batch and then we'll finish off camera. These are also a lighter color. Now, we put our freeze-dried things in 2-quart jars. It just is more convenient for us. We have a little bit of egg powder everywhere. We'll have to clean that up later, but everything is powdered. And so this is 2½ dozen. I added my experiment half dozen eggs to this as well. This is 6 dozen eggs. So we have 8½ dozen eggs right here. One of the things that I am noticing with this is not eggy. I think that this is going to need a little bit more water. So I'm going to put some more water in just a minute. But first, we're going to get our 1/4 of a cup of this egg powder. This egg powder is much more fluffy. That is because the cell walls are not ruined. So I'm putting the warm water now in the freeze-dried eggs. I'm going to borrow this spoon, stir them around a little bit, and let them rehydrate. And I'm going to add just a little bit more water to probably another 2 tablespoons of water over here. And while these rehydrate, I want to talk about a couple of things. And then Jim and I will use these for our breakfast eggs this morning. This is the first time I have rehydrated, dehydrated eggs rather than freeze-dried eggs. Okay, so the temperature of the processing, the drying out, both in the freeze dryer and in the dehydrator, never got over 150 degrees. The freeze dryer got up to 120, and these I processed at about 139, 140. Salmonella is not killed until you reach the high 150s, or most people just say about 160. And so it is imperative that we cook these eggs. We can do that by scrambling them, which I'm going to do in just a moment here, adding them to pancakes or cakes or baking of any kind, so long as they are cooked. We cannot use these. Just pretend that these are raw eggs, which essentially they are. They're just powdered. All right, so now the thing that I want to do is show you how I preserve these, especially for long-term storage. Now, I've been doing quite a bit of reading on this, and the commercial preparers of egg powder put in an oxygen absorber and they vacuum seal. Now, an oxygen absorber pulls out only the oxygen. It does not pull out the air. Nitrogen is left in there. Vacuum sealing pulls out the air. Is 100% of the oxygen gone or 100% of the air gone? No, not really. We don't have that strong of equipment that we can use in our homes, but most of it is gone. Now, what we do not want to create is an environment for botulism. Eggs are low acid, and so if there's moisture in the eggs and we pull all the oxygen out or most of the oxygen out, that is creating an environment for botulism. So I'm not worried at all about these. These are completely dried. The water is all pulled out of these. These, on the other hand, I did in my dehydrator. So is it possible that there's moisture in here? Sure, there is. But because of the way that they are turning in this jar, I think most of the moisture is gone. I think that these will be safe. So we're going to be adding a oxygen absorber, and then I'm going to vacuum seal. This is a brand new vacuum sealer for us. We're not going to talk much about it this time. But right now, we're just going to vacuum seal these, and I am going to put an oxygen absorber in each one. And we need to do this quickly. And I am using used lids. These have been previously used for canning on these jars. And I will re-vacuum seal these oxygen absorbers as well. Okay, now I want to vacuum seal these. And so with this new little with our new vacuum sealer, it is really quite powerful accessory. There was a lot of air in there, which is, oh, I should have waited until after it dinged. I'm still getting used to this. All right, this is very much sealed. So this ring is going on, and now this is shelf stable. These will be shelf stable for 2 to 5 years. They will not last that long for us. We rotate through these. I am using these all the time. So I'm going to finish doing these. Okay, these need a little bit more time to dehydrate, but we're going to go ahead and close out the video anyway. These very much look like eggs. They're slimy the way eggs are. These do a little bit. These are more thick. So I am going to scramble these up really quickly, and I'm going to do it in 2 separate batches, and then I'm going to bring the plates over so you can compare the difference, and I will be right back. All right, they both did great. Cooked just like regular eggs. These are the freeze-dried, and these are the dehydrated. So I'm going to take just a little bite of both. What I'm going to be checking for besides taste is whether or not they are grainy. Not one bit. If I did not know that eggs had been freeze-dried, reconstituted, and scrambled, I never would have known. Tastes exactly like fresh. This is the dehydrated. Not grainy one bit, not at all. I had read, some people said that dehydrated and then powdered are grainy. Not one bit. I can't tell the difference between the two in taste or texture. So that's great. This is a fabulous food to have on our long-term storage shelves. And it will last whether we have a dehydrator or a freeze dryer. Here we have a very successful experience in dehydrating and freeze drying eggs for long-term storage. So I hope you're able to do this. Try it, and I think you'll be very pleased. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you at our next video.